So, the anatomy of the breath. We have a nose, and we have a mouth. The yogis say the nose is for breathing and the mouth is for eating. But we often breathe through our mouth. But the nose is what we should be breathing through, because that's all set up for breathing. So you have like the tacky interior of the nose, which actually attracts all the dust and the bacteria and everything else. Then you have the little hairs in the nose, which help out too. And then you have the the temperature regulation in the nose. Because I don't know if you've ever noticed when you're walking around in London, you might kind of like breathe in and then you cough because A, you probably got some dust in there, and B, it's too cold. So the nose is definitely what you should be breathing through, and the mouth is for eating. Obviously the mouth is a backup because when you've got a cold you can't breathe, but essentially it's in 90% of yogic type work you've always got the mouth closed and you're breathing through the nose. So you're breathing through the nose, it's coming in through the windpipe, down past the voice box, then it goes into the two bronchial tubes, then it kind of goes out a bit like a tree. And at the end of each of these little branches there's like a sac which is covered in capillaries, and that's where the gaseous exchange happens. So you're bringing in air and then the body gets very busy and it swaps over, so you're breathing in a number of different gases, but obviously oxygen, 20% oxygen. And then you're breathing out 16% oxygen, or you're breathing in about 4%, 0.4% carbon dioxide, 0.04%, but you're breathing out 4% carbon dioxide. So you're breathing in 20% oxygen, breathing out 16% oxygen and 4% carbon dioxide. So you are still breathing out some oxygen, which is probably why breath-to-breath, mouth-to-mouth resuscitation still works, because there's still some oxygen in there. So you're breathing in, and then all the air's coming down, going into the branches of the lungs, and then it's going into the capillaries, which is then doing the work of the exchanging of the breath. So you're breathing, you're swapping over, you're collecting the waste, the metabolic waste to go out, and you're bringing in the fresh oxygen to go into the system. And then you have your intercostal muscles, which expand the lungs, which we don't really use very much, because the lungs actually expand always that way, forward and back. And then you have the diaphragm that should be moving downwards. Unfortunately, what happens mostly is that we're sort of stuck down here. So we're kind of breathing up here, the diaphragm's not doing an awful lot, and you've got all this stuff stuck down here. So women especially, we kind of like harbour, it's our wardrobe for all of our stuff. All the anger and resentment, and it all sort of just goes down there, and we hang on to it down there. And because we're not breathing properly, we're just hanging on to it, for dear life. So when you're breathing properly, all the energies can move, and you can actually start letting go of all your stuff. Now, when you breathe in, when you breathe out, there's a pause, which again in the West, we don't really take much notice of, but actually it's one of the most important things in the breath. Excuse me, I'm going to cough. During this pause, everything happens. So for example, when you're breathing in, there's a little pause and the body's very busy doing its gas exchange, and it's got to change direction, completely change direction, everything's got to come out. And then when you breathe out, the body's got to prepare to come in again. This little pause is called kumbhaka, and it's this that I'm very, very, very interested in, and it's this that is part of this surrendered breath. The technique that I'm teaching is not new, but it's something that it's been lost. I'll just come back to my story as well, actually, while I'm actually at this point. I've got a history of insomnia for about the last 20 years. Not so much for the last 5 years, I've done a lot of work on myself, but it started when I got divorced for the first time. I had 4 terrible years of no sleep, 4 hours, 2 hours, waking up in the middle of the night, feeling just absolutely like half dead. And then I got divorced a second time, I found myself married again, divorced a second time, and a nearly bankrupt business, so that kind of like triggered it off again. I've always been in the field of health and well-being, so aerobics instructor, personal trainer, aromatherapist, massage therapist, beauty therapist, moving towards meditation. I went to the States to study Deepak Chopra, and I studied yoga and the breath with my guru in India. And I still work with him, I go out and see him, or I talk to him on the phone. And he said to me a while ago, he said, go away and do this for 40 minutes twice a day. I'm like, oh really? Oh God. Okay. And he said, you've got to do it for, I can't remember how many days he said, but he said if I miss a day, I've got to start at the beginning again. So, but that was like the turning point for me. That was when I really kind of worked out this whole sort of breath thing and the pause. So coming back now to this pause, this breath technique that I'm going to teach sort of towards the end of this morning, you'll learn how to use the pause to like open the door to the breath. Because often in yoga, they'll say belly breathing, force the belly out, which is fine, but you'll find it will shorten the breath because you're forcing the belly out. Proper breathing is about surrender. It's about surrender and opening the door to the breath, which often people don't realise. They think about forcing the belly out, forcing the belly in, and the breath is just still very short and it's not really doing very much. So it's this sort of pause, this kumbhaka that I'm really, really very interested in. Excuse me. So moving on to the connection between the mind, the heart and the breath. The breath is like an interface between the mind and the heart. Whatever's going on in the mind is going on in the breath, is going on in the heart. So if the mind is constantly racing, running, tomorrow, next week, shopping, all that stuff, the heart is going and the breath becomes shallow and short, unfortunately. And you can't get away from the fact that the moment you become more present, the moment that you stay in this moment, the whole thing changes. The breath changes, everything just changes. And I wanted to do a little experiment. If you don't feel anything, that's fine, it'll come. You'll become more sensitive to the breath over time. So just for a moment, close your eyes. What I'd like you to do is I'd like you to take all of your attention into your head. So take your attention into your head, just notice the skin around your scalp, notice what's going on in the mind. Just watch, notice or feel. While you're doing that, I'd like you to notice the breath. I'd like you to see where the chest is moving or what parts of the body are moving. What parts of the body are moving? Where is it moving? How long is the breath? You want your attention in the head. You're watching, feeling, noticing. And notice the length of the breath. Notice where you're feeling the movement of the body. Where's the body moving? Okay, just open your eyes. Now, has anyone got any observations, particularly with where the breath is and the length of the breath? No one's noticed anything?
I found it in my stomach. My breath was coming up from my stomach.
Yeah. Anyone else?
A bit further up, maybe.
Further down. Okay, well it'll come with time, but fundamentally, when you're up in your head, the breath becomes short, and when you come in the present moment, you come down into the heart, the breath will start to become slower, the body will start to open and close as it's supposed to. Because most of the time we do live in the fight or flight response. I don't know, anyone knows about the fight or flight response? Anyone know fight or flight response? Mm-hmm. Just a very, very quick overview. Basically, it's the body's physical response to stress. Obviously, millions of years ago when we didn't have cars and, we were a bit more animal-like, we either had to run like mad, because we had something on our heels, or we had to kind of like stick up for ourselves. So the body gets prepared, all the blood gets pumped into the legs, the adrenaline gets pumped in, the heart rate goes faster, the breath becomes quicker, shallower, blood clotting gets better, because if we cut ourselves, we've got to, get ready and just got to get closed up very quickly. And that's like the physical response to stress, which most of us live in because we're actually worried about our ego now rather than our possessions. What's going to happen? I haven't got enough of this. I'm not doing this. I haven't got enough money for that or the other or whatever. And we're constantly in that response. So they call that now the reactive response, but it's the same physical response. And that just keeps everything going, and that's a lot of the time why people can't sleep, because you're constantly in that state. You're waking up in that state and you're going to bed in that state. So, it will definitely affect your sleep, without a doubt. So if you can work with the breath to bring yourself into the moment, lengthen the breath, you will definitely, A, feel more relaxed and more vital, and B, you will sleep better. So sleep is just a byproduct of just working and being more present with the breath.